Our next presentation deals with optimization planning. Joining me now are two executives with AFS Technologies, Joel Cartwright, Director of Product Management, and Shelley Foul, a Solution Engineer. Joel and Shelley, the podium is yours.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the time and appreciate everyone joining the call today. So yes, as the slide indicates, the webinar is designed, our objective here, to talk about when it's time to evolve into optimization planning. My name is Joel Cartwright. As John mentioned, I'm Head of Product Development for our TPM retail applications at AFS. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, a little over 20 years, the last 7 in the software industry. Joining me is Shelley Foul. Shelley?
Good morning. I'm Shelley Foul, Solution Engineer for AFS TPM Retail. I have more than 20 years experience in consumer packaged goods from all different positions, brand management, product management, pricing management. In the last 5, almost 6 years now, have been on the software side working with consumer packaged goods in both trade promotion management and optimization.
Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're joining me today. So really the reason the webinar objective is to help define the points when the evolution into trade optimization becomes a necessity. When you're challenged with an increase in top-line growth and there's no increase to trade budget, and identify what the best practices are on reviewing these tactics and price points. And specifically to see if there is a need to overcome particular thresholds. At AFS Technologies, we have over 100 clients utilizing our software. And the biggest question is on their mind is, am I ready for optimization planning? How do I know when I'm ready? When do I need to make that leap of faith? So what we'll be talking about today are the components necessary to understand, and ask the questions to yourself, what it needs or what I need to know or what I need to do to make that next step into planning, and that's optimization planning. So what we want to be able to do is, can you analyze and strategize with only your historical data? So questions to ask yourself. We want to define the challenge. All right, what do I need to accomplish in the coming year? Do I need to grow top line, keep the trade budget flat? I need to define my category trade marketing tactics, make sure I understand what are my key components, merchandising, pricing, combination of both, because these are the key factors that are going to be involved in optimization and predictive planning. Defining your objectives. What's the target? What's my areas of growth? Is it top line? Is it new points of distribution, shopper cart growth, etc.? Define what you want to understand, or what do I want to get out of optimization? Is it an improved base volume, incremental volume understanding, point of sale tactics, price versus a combination of two? Then define the scope. When I've made the decision, okay, I'm ready to move to that next level, how am I going to ease into this? Because change management always comes the next hurdle after the decision's been made. How do I change the culture internally and take that leap of faith? And the next steps, what optimization is needed? So the questions to ask: can you properly analyze and strategize with only historical data you have? And the key questions here: are you analyzing more than just your own historical shipment data? Are you encompassing other point of sale activity, IRI, Nielsen? Are you comparing those two together against shipment data? Do you know and understand what the impact your promotional activities, display activities are getting? Can I truly understand that? Can I truly understand what lift did I get from a feature or an ad? What did it generate? Was your competition running a promotion prior to, during the same promotion you ran? So understanding the cannibalization within the promotion. And is the category you're competing in growing, or is it declining? Maybe I should look elsewhere. So let's take a look at some of the traditional approaches that are falling short. Shelley?
Thanks, Joel. So there's all types of traditional approaches that we're all trying to accomplish with our promotional activities to generate more trade efficiency. We're adding new items to the shelves. But the problem is the new items being added to the shelves really aren't overpowering the loss of sales in existing items. So that's really not making a big impact in the categories. We also see that we're doing more frequent promotions, but the trade efficiency is eroding. And as consumers, we can kind of feel and understand that, because when you start to look at the items that you yourself purchase at the store, I always like to say the last time you bought your 2-liter of soda, you were always paying a sale price for it, a promotion price. When was the last time you paid just a regular price? So we're seeing a lot more promotion frequency, but we're really not seeing those promotions generate the volumes and the execution that we're hoping for and that we're paying for.
Those are great points, Shelley, and that's exactly true. And that's what our clients that are using our tools now are asking us. They want to understand this information. So let's take a quick poll question. And I love to introduce the term the Sally plan. I always introduce that and say, well, Joel, what's the Sally plan? Well, the Sally plan is the same as last year's plan. So what I'd like to know is what % of your retail plans are on a Sally plan? I'm basically running the same plan year over year. So go ahead and we'll submit our questions. Give it a few more times for folks to vote. Seeing a lot of folks are skewing to that 90% and above on the Sally plan. That's not good.
Doesn't shock us, does it? Doesn't shock us, though, does it, Joel?
No, not in the least. That's kind of what we figured, and that's that. How do I evolve to the next plan? So some of our results are, pretty skewed, pretty interesting. Kind of what we expected. So you kind of get what we're selling here in this webinar. Very good. So what we need to do then is define the challenge. What are we needing to do? You're running the same plan as last year, but we got to keep the top line. We got to grow the top line. But you now have been challenged with grow the top line, but I'm not going to give you any more money. So using the same trade dollars, you now have to buy more revenue. So now you have to strategize. What's the best promotional activities that generate the greater lifts? And encompassing what's the more cost-effective activities. We're not going to cut trade here. We're going to reallocate the trade within your promotional activity. So what you're trying to understand is moving from the costly confusion of a trade investment and have more insight-driven results when you're integrating the analytics and execution into your workflow. So you're given the top-down plan into ERP. Here's my plan that I need to run. And then what we have to do is intersect with the green arrow an optimization tool. Okay, here's the plan. Here's the plan that I've been presented with. Now I know there are components of this plan that I'm going to have to run at a retailer, but what are some activities that I can analyze and understand which may drive volume? I know I got to be at a certain price point at this retailer, but for this event, do I have to have the ad for 2 weeks? Do I drop the ad? Do I need a feature? Or the all-encompassing, do I increase my sale price or potentially go over a significant pricing threshold? The predictive tool is designed to understand, to say, all right, here's the plan you need to run. And what Gartner's telling us, and they tell us consistently, the quality and capabilities of the TPX solutions that are out there is really no reason for consumer good manufacturers to work for spreadsheets anymore. So basically what that translates to, if you're planning in Excel spreadsheets, it's time to evolve essentially into that next component. So Shelley, let's talk about some trade promotion optimization and combining that with post-event analysis.
Thank you, Joel. We hear TPO, that buzzword, trade promotion optimization, tossed around a lot. There's probably a lot of confusion as to exactly what does TPO get me? What is it going to do? How is it going to help me effectively grow my promotional business? So it's combining a couple of things, being able to truly analyze your post-event promotional activities, going back after that promotion is over with and seeing how it did, and combining that with predictive planning, the what-ifs for the future. So some of the aspects that TPO are going to be able to provide for an organization is it's definitely going to give you your quantified return on trade investment. You're really going to be able to get down into the weeds and see what those ROIs are on your promotion. The best solution out there is going to be one that can integrate with your TPM solution where you're already managing your trade promotion spending. And it's going to bring together or harmonize all those disparate data silos that you have out there, bringing in your shipment data, your pricing data, your cost of goods, your syndicated data, any third-party POS data, things such as that, bringing it all together in one solution so that the answers to all of your questions are there. You're not going from one system to another. Again, I mentioned earlier that post-event analytics, being able to go in once you've executed that promotion and really digging down and seeing how that promotion was executed. How did it do? Because that's essential to know how you plan going forward. In order to go forward, you've got to understand what happened historically. And then from knowing what happened historically, being able to build those predictive what-if scenarios. And with predictive analytics, having it guide you along the way, knowing from a statistical standpoint exactly what happened so that it can help you pull together those what if. What if I want to run it at 2 for 3 versus 10 for 10, et cetera. And then taking and doing that optimization of the events and the calendars using constraint-based modeling that you find in TPO solutions. So
Shelley, elaborate. Shelley, elaborate on a little bit on constraint-based modeling.
Well, that is just basically going to be going in and looking back at exactly what all's happened historically. It's going to be taking into account all of those different events, all of the competitive activity, how the category is doing, all of bringing together all of those elements that you yourself are going to be able, have a hard time being able to do that from Excel and just looking at pieces of data here and there. So it's getting into that statistical modeling.
Very good. So Shelley, talk about the result and the pressure around trade spend. What's that result? What's it looking like?
Well, we were talking about a moment ago. It's almost like I look at that picture and it looks like a funnel, kind of like a tornado spinning around. You've got all these different elements that you're having to juggle and you're having to understand. One element's going to be regular price. That's your foundation of your product. So not only knowing what your regular price is, but also how is it against your competitors? What are those gaps in pricing between your own pricing and your competitors? Because that can be a big indicator on your base volume. Also taking into account trade activity, what we talked about a moment ago. Are you running features? And if you are, how are they being executed? What kind of results are you getting? What kind of display activity are you getting? What kind of effects are you getting from your TPRs and your price reductions? And then you've also got to keep in mind those things that are also going on at the same time. Seasonality, the time of the year that your product sells better than other times. Store effects. What else is going on in the store that might drive volume or cause volume to decline? There's just so many things that all have to come together in order for you to get a good understanding of your sales volume.
Very good, which leads us to the next poll question. Now, not that any of us like to take pricing, but those situations occur, and that's one of the potential decisions that would have to be made. So how likely are you to be a price leader in your category? Very likely, somewhat likely, it depends, not a snowball's chance in the sun. Interesting results as well, pretty across the board. So interesting. All right, so let's take a look at the results. That's interesting. It depends. Now, that's true. It depends. I guess it depends. I would probably want to better understand that. Maybe that's a question that I can ask towards the end of the system. Is it depending upon what pricing it is, where you are in the category, what analytics, pricing thresholds? So be interested to know what are some of those depends factors within the tool. So great poll results there. So what that leads us to is, again, back to the point, defining your category. So it depends within the system. Understanding your trade marketing tactics. Does it depend upon my pricing, combination of both? But at the end of the day, the optimization tool or the predictive modeling ultimately is going to depend on the deployment with the TPM system to make sure that everything flows into the overall plan for merchandising pricing, and the execution. Because even with optimization, the best laid plans to rest. Again, it's just a plan. We still need to factor the execution of price, and that coincides with the analysis. What price point did I pay for? What price point did I get for my events that I ran? It's pretty much everything across the board, all different types of pricing tactics, and whatever is working for that individual retailer, or what's the priority for that retailer. So Shelley, give us a little more insight building off of that pricing component, understanding your price point and pricing thresholds.
You advance the slide. Thank you. Understanding your price point and your pricing thresholds. My background is pricing. I have received my certification in pricing, and I didn't realize till I started going through that program, how much we really just take price for granted. We don't really dig into the weeds enough with pricing and how something got priced and how we compete with our competitors in price. And also looking at, having to break it out. You've got to look at price in two different ways. What's your base price and how is the elasticity on it, along with your promotional price, elasticity or, intensity. So looking at this chart, and we're not going to get too much into this because it can get pretty heavy, but this should be how you're kind of looking at your business. So a decision framework for your price changes and your promotional discounts. Where do you want to fall on this quadrant? Do you want to be running EDLP, where you've got high your everyday price, keeping it low? Do you want to be more of the high-low category or the high-shallow? So understanding not only where you want your base price to fall, but also your promotional price. And if you go out there and you start to Google things regarding price elasticity and the pricing quadrants, you'll find lots of information that can guide you to getting in and actually pinpointing that if you don't have a TPO tool to assist you with that. But understanding your price and those thresholds are so important. Again, your base price, that's your foundation. If you don't have a good base price, your promotional prices are probably not going to be that effective.
And having said that too, Shelley, it's probably not having the good base price, any sort of analysis on a return on investment when you're at a sale price, probably not going to mean too much. Fair question?
Exactly. Very, very, very good point. Yes. Yes. So looking at price threshold, I apologize, Joel. So looking at price threshold, you got to look back, and if you don't have a TPO tool, you can go in and do this using manual calculations in Excel. It's no fun. I used to do that at the CPG company I worked at before we got a TPO solution. But looking at, historically when you've changed price, how was your volume affected? And then knowing that going forward, depending on your product and the thresholds that you may encompass. So for example, when I say threshold, when I was previously with a CPG company, we had a value-priced product in the snack cake category. And it seemed like any time we crossed a threshold of 99 cents, so let's say the price was $1.99. Once we crossed that threshold and looked at $2.09, the volume dropped substantially. And it really didn't drop that much more if instead of going to $2.09, we went to $2.19. So we weren't losing any more volume at a $2.19 price point, but we were generating, more revenue on that lower volume. So looking at, what is your elasticity and what is that threshold? Could you possibly gain a little bit more volume by going a little bit more on your price? So getting in and looking at that, not only for your base price, but also for your promotional pricing. So again, you can go out and Google information on how to do that manually. Again, it's going to take into account having to do a lot of manual work, looking back historically at what happened when you changed your price, how your volumes fluctuated. And then you can use that information to guide you forward. But a TPO solution is definitely going to be the quickest, easiest way to capture those things and those gaps.
So Shelley, having said that, I think the point you're really making here is don't look at it with having blinders on. Don't look at it from just a top-line growth. Look at it from a net. What's the overall impact when you're evaluating this? Fair question?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So understanding what trade spend drives in the most volume, so building again what Shelley was talking about, looking at it from a net revenue perspective and being able to put side by side which feature outperforms display in both lift and cost run. So putting your tactics side by side, basically tactics specifically around your point of sale tactics and understanding the segment. Because ultimately, from what we found in talking with our customers and working with them, this is the biggest mystery, the biggest question. I've really never compared them together from a visual aspect where I can make informed decisions. Looking at it over a 52-week period and understanding what those lift rates and cost components are and taking a look at the unit comparative by week. So I understand what tactics are performing and what tactics are performing well together. So understanding those components. So not in addition to pricing is what are the other aspects that need to be encompassed as well.
And Joel, before you jump on to the next slide, I just also want to encourage people is, once you're comfortable looking at this type of information for your own products, start to look at what your competitors are doing. I spent a lot of time when I was in CPG analyzing my competitors, not only their price, but this very information here. And there were a lot of lessons that I learned about what our competition was doing that ultimately helped assist us in making decisions going forward. So not only focusing on your own products, but looking at your competitors in your category.
Now, that's a great point, Shelley. It's when you know the competition, you'll have a leg up on the competition. So that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. So when he talked about it, we want to define your objectives. So far through the discussion, we've talked about the questions you have to answer yourself. And if those questions are coming up that we're asking, you're saying yes, which is alluding to I need to take a look at how I can weave in optimization or predictive capability in my planning. The next step is to kind of define what your objective is. What is the growth? Setting an expectation on the growth target is really important when you're using optimization. It's not going to be the magic bullet. It's not going to be the end-all, be-all, because you're fighting some technology constraints as it relates to some information availability by customer. But you want to understand, I want to set an expectation of change management to internally, and I talked about that. So first component, define the areas of growth. Is it new points of distribution versus shopper cart growth or driving volume? And will that optimization provide the insight for those points? And it's manage that change management internally. We talked about the Sally plan, and that's the rut. So you're doing the tightrope walk across that change bridge because you got to get to growth, because the rut, i.e. the Sally plan, is not working historically. So I think the key component is first you want to understand what accounts are most responsive. So Shelley, talk a little bit about that.
Well, we talked a moment ago in the other slide about knowing how your products respond to features and displays and TPRs and how your competitors respond. That next area that you want to zero in and analyze is going to be the accounts, the markets. Which accounts or markets are most responsive with that promotional activity? Maybe you're doing a lot of promoting in one specific retailer, but you're just not seeing the results. But yet in another retailer, maybe you're not doing as much promotional activity and you're seeing a lot of results. So then taking that information and breaking it down and looking at it by retailer, in a chart simple like this, going in and finding a particular brand or product that you promote a lot and mapping it out and looking at it, okay, which accounts, which markets am I getting high response rates to on my promotions? In this account here, or this picture here, Price Chopper is definitely moving, and more highly responsive than, say, for example, Demoulas. If it's around a specific certain time period, what's driving that? Is it the specific region of the country? If it's within the same region, what's happening? I would go in and I would look at this type of information in one market. So, for example, the LA market, and I would see how the LA market was doing, and then I would drill down a little more and see how each of those major retailers that make up that LA market were doing. And then that would give me insights into, how often am I being promoted in this retailer versus that retailer in that market? How's my competitors doing? So understanding where which accounts are most responsive when you promote, because you definitely you may have to do some promotions with these retailers, but you don't want to be too promotion heavy if you're not getting the response rate that you need.
So Shelley, it sounds like this could be a simple exercise to capture some low-hanging fruit that's out there on a retail perspective. Fair enough?
Most certainly.
So promotion response, as Shelley talked about, varies dramatically by retailer, based upon the execution of the price point, based upon the display activity, how quickly you can get into market. So a simple exercise, building on what Shelley talked about, taking it from the aspect of the event activity, understand and do a comparative by, say, a segmentation of your customers. Take a cross-section of your larger retailers or smaller retailers or a certain area that you feel there is growth of opportunity, class of trade or by retailer, and compare side by side and see what's the promotion effectiveness, understanding and analyzing the tactics. Okay, at Ahold, I'm running TPR, display lift. Well, TPRs are not really doing that well. Or you take a look at, do I need my TPRs on Demoulas or something like that? So really understanding what you're doing. There's a lot of clients here you can see feature and display activity. What are the cost components around display corrugate or display pallets, things like that. So it does look like feature and display is a great item, but you want to make sure to encompass the overall cost of those features and so forth. So that's always a factor. But analysis and understanding by retailer the promotional response with that. So Shelley, I think build a little bit more. We've seen a lot of talk. We've talked a bit about the key components. How would you analyze what you're looking at here? How would you describe this?
Well, this is looking at, for example, what you could see from a TPO program going in and building different components. So I'm looking at a combination of things. That funnel we looked at earlier with all those things swirling around, here I can capture them all in one page. Based on what I'm wanting to promote here and the time period I'm wanting to promote and the account I'm wanting to promote, what is my key competitive promotions and merchandising that's going on? So that's laid out there in that top portion. Are there any consumer promotion events that are going on? Any advertising, radio spots, couponing, anything like that that may be going on in the marketplace that we can capitalize along with promotional activity? Of course, your TPM data, how that integrates into a solution, and any KPIs that may be set up in a TPM solution to drive certain key products being promoted at certain times. And then layering that in with looking at promotion, price, and merchandising support. Exactly what's happened. This is looking back historically at promotional activities and what else was going on. So you can't analyze what you can't see. And we have so much data that's available to us. And, what do you look at first? What do you look at last? It's having to take a bunch of this stuff and looking at it at the same time, and being able to see it laid out like this is going to truly be able to give you insights into what's going on and why in those examples below you have a couple of big bars where the promotions were very effective, but yet you have several where they weren't, and being able to overlay that with everything else that's going on.
So Shelley, this gives you a starting point. It all encompasses the visually on what you're wanting to analyze, and it gives it a way to drill down into key metrics or elements that we saw in that funnel.
Most definitely. Being able to go in, and if I wanted to know more about that competitor promotion that was going on, I could go into it, or this next slide leads great into it. Looking at not just what's base, what's incremental, what's subsidized volume, but being able to go in and tell you what the sales bump, what's the incremental volume driven by, and being able to break that piece of it down. So how much of that incremental volume was actually market expansion? How much of it was brand switch? Because your product was on promotion this week, it was pretty interesting to somebody who typically buys your competitor, so the price was attractive enough for them to try you. How much of it was store switch? So maybe they normally shop at Kroger and the item that they love is on sale at Publix. So is it a low enough price that it caused them to actually switch stores and go to Publix and buy it? Time switch, is it something that maybe they typically buy a certain time of the year, but because it was at a great promotional price or it was there in the store staring at them from a special display, they decided to go ahead and buy it early. So getting into the weeds on incremental volume and not just lumping it together and say, okay, this was the effect of a promotion must have been. Well, there could have been other things that were driving that incremental activity.
And Shelley, do you feel that you would have to analyze every promotion, or could you take one or two retailers and draw a pretty specific conclusion based upon the analysis of just those two events?
I think you could start small like that, yes. You're definitely going to want to pull and analyze where you're spending your promotional money most at. That's going to be where I would start with. So, if you have a promotion in a specific retailer that was pretty hefty dollar amount, that's the one I'm going to start with and analyze. And then I'm going to maybe spread out from there. But you can start small because it's a lot of information to have to bring together, but I would focus on where I'm spending my the most of my promotional spend and zero in on those.
Very good. So it's building that analytics that Shelley just talked about and putting it into the planning process. So it's taking those planning points and saying, okay, I want to put this into some sort of a live simulation session, which will provide a series of validated planning scenarios where I can validate all the components that I want to hit after I've identified my growth targets, which will in turn saying, okay, here's my growth objective, here's how much money I've spent. By comparing multiple scenarios encompassing all those tactics and events Shelley talked about, pricing, provide me with an optimal plan that's going to deliver against my KPIs, but more importantly, my objective. At which point, now I have a winning plan that I can now deploy to my trade promotion management tool for execution and deployment and actualization. So controlling that. Because again, the best laid plans laid waste, but I need to understand and make sure that they're still within my overall KPIs. So building the analytics around this, the analytics being promotional data, the lift data, the historical data, the consumption data, et cetera, as it relates to those. And as Shelley talked about, this is something that you would start with your biggest retailer, those components, and start maybe at that biggest plan and then ease into it to talk about it from a change management standpoint. Don't jump head first into the pool and start planning every customer. Let's start with, say, Kroger first and go from there. I think what you'll also find when you're dealing with a retailer like Kroger or Safeway, when you present this type of very thought out, well-planned scenario optimized plan to Kroger, they're looking for key insights from manufacturers that maybe they haven't thought about or specifically related to categories. So you're going to find from a change management perspective, is the retailer buying into this? Yeah, more than likely he or she is, because they're looking for these key insights as well because they want to sell more product for them out of their stores.
You're very right, Joel. I remember when I was with a TPO solution, having that information that you can go into a retailer and show that it's fact-based data, that really does speak volumes between yourself and your retailer.
Absolutely, absolutely. The collaboration between retailers and the manufacturers, we've seen that grow exponentially when the manufacturers are bringing in well thought out data. And the detailed output from each plan is what's going to determine the best strategy, one, and two, how it's going to deploy to the TPM. You'll have descriptive information on the account plan, the date plan range, the current specific account tactics that are required, and then any sort of recommended change with the optimized tactics. It'll provide an overview of the financial implications. What's the impact to revenue, profit, margin, trade rate, et cetera. Making sure you're aligning to your top-down plan. And then the financial implications, most importantly, to the retailer. And this goes back to the collaborative planning. Now, When I present this to my retailer, probably not going to show them my manufacturing margins and so forth. But if I can present the plan to say, hey, this is what it's going to do for you, your retail sales dollars, your profit dollars, and your margin based upon what we've decided, this is the type of plan I want to run, which may be different than the planogram that they've designed. So it's understanding and creating win-win scenarios. So post-event analysis, we talked a little bit this throughout the webinar. How much do I need to do? What do I need to focus on? That's entirely up to you, but it's typically, again, coincides with trade management. Ultimately, I want to look at this, but maybe the first step will be to look at trade spend and the rate and compare that to incremental profit or margin or lift. What's my rate? What's my spending rate? Can I reallocate? Can I expand that? Ultimately driving to incremental revenue. Understanding then down the road from a post-event analysis, all right, I've analyzed my trade rate, my incremental volume, lift, and revenue. What's my impact on profit margin? And what's my return on investment? Then comparing plan versus the actuals once the plan comes to fruition and comparing back to the overall annual plan. So how well your trade investment is affecting your top and bottom lines as it relates to the plan. So Shelley, I think it's time to take a quiz. What do you think?
Oh, okay. I hope everybody's ready.
So Shelley, why don't you walk us through this?
All right. So we're going to give you what we call the 3 C's. And based on what we've got laid out here, evaluate your current situation. These are going to be the levers that if you decide you need to turn them a little bit or a lot are going to help you know if you're ready for optimization. Because optimization, like Joel said, it's something that you definitely don't want to just go jump into the deep end in. If you can dip your toe in it and get a little bit of experience in it, you're much better off in the long run. So that first C, collaborate. Are my retailers executing the plans we've agreed upon? That's going back and looking at those promotional activities that have been executed and seeing if we got the display activity and the ad activity and the TPR we were hoping for. If you're not, why? What's the profit and ROI of my promotions for my retail partner? I remember not long ago I did a webinar like this, or actually it wasn't a webinar, it was a speaking presentation, and I asked people to raise their hands how many are doing ROI analysis after their promotions are completed. And I was shocked at the number of hands that did not go up. We spend so much time focused on executing and laying out promotions, and we don't go back and we don't analyze them. If we don't analyze them, then we have no idea how they did, and we can't plan going forward. So, do you know what your ROIs are for your promotions? And if you don't, you definitely need to. And, are there areas for improvement in how you're doing things now? Compete. Do you know when your competitors are running promotions? Like I was saying earlier, I remember spending a couple of hours one afternoon just zeroing in on a competitor in a certain market because that's the market area they were beating us in, and I needed to understand why. And sometimes I think we take all that syndicated data and information that we get for granted because we have so much. But you can understand a lot about your market and your competitors by doing that. So, looking at things like, how are your competitors' promotions affecting your performance? What tactics and pricing are they using? If you're seeing them continuously get big lifts on promotional activities in the same retailers that you're promoting and you're not getting that lift, why? You've got to get the answers to those questions. And then the last C, compare. What tactics are driving the most revenue, profit, and volume? You've got to know the answer to those things. If you're spending tons of money on ads and they're either not getting executed or you're not getting much for your bang for your buck, maybe you scale those down or don't do them. So, how do your consumer marketing affect your trade promotion performance? What could you be doing from a consumer marketing perspective to help build those promotions up? Maybe it is scheduling if you've got advertising going on or couponing going on, focusing on trade promotion in those same areas. And then, how does my plan compare to what actually happened? Again, similar to what we talked about on Collaborate with ROI, how does your plan look against what what actually happened versus what you planned? And, if any of your answers to these are no or I don't know, then possibly you are ready for optimization and knowing exactly how to answer these questions going forward.
Very good. Thanks, Shelley. So I think now, John, we can take some time for some questions for us.
Sure, Joel. One question that came in: what are the best practitioners of optimization planning gaining from the technology?
Could you repeat the question, John? I'm sorry?
Sure. What are the best practitioners, those who practice optimization planning, what are they gaining from this technology?
From what we're seeing, and Shelley can elaborate more, what we're seeing is they're able to reallocate trade spend more effectively and drive growth in category share, keeping the trade spend flat year over year. So the best practice they're evaluating, okay, here's my predicted plan. I'm able to see I'm usually used to spend at a $2.99 rate. Now I'm only spending at a $2.50 rate, and I'm getting about the same amount of volume. There's the after effect that's also that it's planning is the downstream effect. So when planning at a certain price point, what's going to be in my impact to volume? So the best practice that they're gaining is an increased forecast accuracy as it related to inventory planning, load planning. Shelley, anything to add on that?
Just also, again, what we talked about earlier is having that fact-based data with your retailer. I have seen time and time again where manufacturers who are equipped with optimization type information being able to go to their buyer, and their buyer is leaning on them for information on the category and maybe putting them up a little further the ladder of wanting them to provide more insights because they know they have data-driven information that can help them better plan and execute things within that retailer. So you never can go wrong with too much data and knowing the insights from that. So having that leg up, so to speak, on your competition and through the retailer knowing that you can help them optimize their category.
Okay, excellent. I think that's all the time we have, but for more information, we can direct you to the website, afsi.com, and on the screen you'll see the contact information for Shelley and for Joel, the email address and also phone numbers. Don't hesitate to call them. They'd love to hear from you with further questions or an elaboration on this presentation, which was just great. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, John.